You did not build what you've built to be forced out of it, not by the market, not by your competition, and certainly not by your biology. But here's what I'm watching happen with women in the matriarch phase, that transitional phase between mother phase of building and grinding, and before the crone phase of retirement and winding down. Many of the women in this phase want to keep going, but they can't. And they're not falling apart in some big dramatic way, they're just quietly dissolving. Energy that used to be reliable becomes inconsistent. Memory that used to be sharp becomes foggy, and a body that used to be able to go, go, go slows them down. And though the belief in the business mission is still there, there's something underneath it that just feels flat. And because it's all typically happening gradually, and because to everyone else, you still look like you're functioning at the highest levels, it's easy to keep postponing the audit. And I want to talk to you about what I mean by audit. There are 5 resilience factors that are either compounding and working in your favor, or they're disappearing under the surface. And unlike your business assets, these don't just lose value over time if you ignore them. They determine whether you get to choose what the next 20 or 30 years looks like, or whether the choice gets made for you. And today we're talking about the highest stakes portfolio that you own, and it's not your business or your bank accounts. Welcome to the Frequency of Yes, the podcast for women leaders creating limitless success, deep empowerment, and divine wealth on their terms. I'm Kirsten Carey, and I'm obsessed with helping badass women feel good in their bodies so they can sustain wildly successful businesses without grinding or sacrificing themselves. Today, I want to give you a framework for thinking about your health and longevity in a way that probably fits how you already think about your finances, as a portfolio. Not as a wellness plan or a self-care checklist, a portfolio of assets across 5 categories that either compounds over time when you invest in it or depletes when you leave it unmanaged. Now, the 5 categories are structural resilience, cognitive resilience, spiritual resilience, physical resilience, and relational resilience. And each one is a distinct asset class. Each one has specific risk factors in this phase of life, and each one has a compounding return when invested in strategically. And each one carries a real cost when underfunded that shows up directly in your capacity, your leadership, and your ability to have choices. Because here's the core premise of this episode. The return on the resilience portfolio is not just so you can live longer. It's so you can live your life with as many choices as possible. Choices like the freedom to lead for as long as you want to, or to step back when you're ready, not when your body or your cognitive function forces you out. You built your business because you wanted to own your choices. This is almost always the reason most women choose entrepreneurship over a corporate track. It's not the money, it's the freedom of choice. Women take on the heavy responsibility of business ownership in exchange for the freedom to make decisions the way they want. The resilience portfolio is what keeps that ability to have the freedom of choice intact for the next 20 or 30 years. So let's walk through each of the 5 categories as they impact you personally and professionally during this phase of life. First, the biology of the resilience portfolio. The first of the 5 assets in this portfolio, as it relates specifically to biology, is structural resilience. This is your bone density, skeletal stability, and joint integrity. And I start here because it's the category that I think gets the least amount of attention, but often the one with the steepest consequences when it goes unmanaged. Estrogen, of course, plays a critical role in bone maintenance. And as hormones decline through perimenopause and menopause, bone loss accelerates, often significantly. And most women have absolutely no baseline to measure against because no one told them to get one. And then the first time many women learn about their bone density is when something breaks, like literally breaks, which isn't strategic management, it's crisis response. The investment window for structural resilience is not unlimited either. The interventions that build and protect bone, including weight-bearing movement and specific nutritional support, are most effective when they start before the loss compounds. And this is not a conversation for your 80s. It's a conversation for right freaking now. Because you can strengthen and rebuild bone, but it has to be intentional and it has to be strategic. Next is cognitive resilience. Now, this is your memory, recall, processing speed, and sharpness. And neuroplasticity makes all of that trainable, like building muscle in your body. You can also build strength in your brain. And with memory issues like Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia reaching all-time highs, cognitive resilience is a critical asset. A richly resourced cognitive system isn't just about remembering things. It's about the foundation of strategic thinking, risk management, creative problem solving, and pretty much every other decision that you make. Estrogen has a documented relationship with brain function. The brain fog, the word retrieval gaps, and the short term memory fluctuations that most women experience in perimenopause are real symptoms, but they don't have to be permanent if you invest in your cognitive resilience. What matters here is what you do during and after the hormonal transition to support and protect neural function. The brain remains plastic throughout your life. You can build cognitive resilience at any age, but the inputs matter, and the window where they compound most effectively is now. Spiritual resilience, this is the connection to purpose, fulfillment, trust, and belief. This is the category I see so many women pushing off during the building years because it feels like a self-centered luxury. And it's not a luxury, and it's definitely not selfish. It's a biological driver of longevity. The research on purpose and health outcomes is clear. Women with a strong and active sense of purpose have measurably different trajectories in cognitive health, cardiovascular function, and immune resilience. And purpose evolves over time. What it meant to build the business is not necessarily what it means to lead from the matriarch phase. The spiritual resilience investment in this phase is the active work of asking yourself, what am I here for now? And for clarity, when I say spiritual resilience, this isn't a religious context, though it can be for some. What I'm talking about is the connection to self and to whatever you connect with more deeply when it comes to the greater universe and your involvement in it. How you do it or what you call it isn't really the important piece. The connection is. The reason behind it all, your purpose, your reason to be. It's a critical asset which influences overall resilience in this space. Physical resilience. This is metabolic function. This is immune capacity, muscle strength, and organ health. The category most women assume that they have handled if they exercise occasionally or they eat healthy or they've never really had any physical health problems. But this asset shifts most significantly in this phase in ways that are not always visible until they've already compounded. The loss of muscle mass accelerates after 40 and continues through the menopausal transition. The women who are actively maintaining and building muscle now are building a physical asset that pays returns in energy, metabolic efficiency, immune regulation, and physical independence for decades. So if you're not actively building and maintaining muscle in this phase, you are losing it. Not because of age alone, but because muscle requires active investment or it will atrophy. And without building and maintaining muscle, it will impact your bone density, your strength, your energy, and your fat storage. And all of that impacts cognitive function and stamina. So it's an important asset to build and maintain. And then within physical resilience is also metabolic resilience. This is the body's ability to regulate energy, manage blood sugar, and process fuel efficiently, and then maintain metabolic flexibility. And as hormone levels shift, insulin sensitivity often shifts with them. I spent a lot of time on this on the last episode, so if you missed it, I highly recommend you go back for it. But this is why strategies that worked for you in your 30s may not be producing the same results now, and typically why so many women in this phase complain about sudden weight gain, especially in the midsection, even if they haven't changed their diet or their exercise routines and have never had problems with weight in their past. This is not a discipline issue. It's a changed metabolic environment that requires a different investment strategy. And then finally, relational resilience. This is your friends, your connection, your belonging, your community. And it's the category that's most likely sacrificed during the mother building years. The research on this and the importance of social connection and longevity is absolutely astounding. Chronic isolation carries health consequences that are comparable to smoking. And the women who built the business, who prioritize the clients and the teams and the deliverables, they often find themselves at 50 looking around and realizing that their relationships disappeared while their revenue was getting bigger. And interestingly, but not surprisingly, There's also been an increase in women in this phase getting divorced and breaking off long-term relationships. 80% of Gen X divorces are initiated by women. And they're saying it's because they need a different connection and support at this stage than what they were willing to accept at 20 or 30 when they formed the original relationship. Women want more, and they're finally taking action to demand more, even if it means leaving to find it on their own. And this is not about the number of relationships or the length of the relationships. Women report over and over that it's about the depth and the genuine connection. Colleague relationships, client relationships, they have their place, but they don't substitute for the ones that exist outside of the business. The friendships where you're not the CEO, the community where you're not the expert, the relationships where your presence matters and not your performance. And in the matriarch phase, relational resilience is not a nice to have. It's a valuable longevity asset. And there are dozens of studies in respected publications from organizations like the American Psychological Association, the Mayo Clinic, Harvard, and it's all over PubMed. These articles support that the number one factor in longevity above genes, above nutrition, and above lifestyle is connection and belonging. So if you've been pushing that away or struggling to find people who get you, you are not alone in that. And that's one of the most common things I hear from the women who attend my retreats and events, that the most important takeaway was being among women who get it, where they finally felt like they were in and among their people, where they finally felt seen and heard. That connection, that sense of belonging isn't a little asset. According to the studies, it's the most important one. So now let's talk about the business side of this, because every category I just named has a direct impact on your revenue, your leadership, and your capacity. So when we look at the underfunded resilience portfolio costs when it comes to business, let's look at structural resilience again first. When structural resilience is underfunded, the business consequence is disruption. A fracture, a fall, chronic pain, a limitation on your mobility. They're not just independent health events. They're operational issues. They pull you out of the work at the worst possible time, often with no warning and with recovery timelines that are significantly longer if your structural integrity was already struggling. When cognitive resilience is underfunded, it shows up in the quality of your decisions, the speed of your thinking, the sharpness of your strategy. And when you are operating through a system that is not adequately resourced, it can make you feel less intelligent, less capable, less fluid. The difference between a richly resourced cognitive system and a depleted one, it's not always obvious in the outcomes, but it shows up in the amount of energy it takes to get the same outcomes. And over time, it shows up in your ability to make decisions and how often you feel stuck or disconnected. When spiritual resilience is underfunded, leadership suffers because the real drive supporting the business gets stifled. It's often subtle, but it's significant because most of us learn how to show up no matter what. Even if we don't feel the drive, we still show up and we perform. But the energetic force behind everything is missing. So clients and team members feel it. The offers feel less inspiring to potential customers. The vision feels less exciting. And the tolerance for risk, which is connected to sense of purpose, shrinks. Then the energy shifts to staying more safe rather than leading from conviction. And when physical resilience is underfunded, energy becomes inconsistent and it impacts how much you accomplish. The woman who used to be able to run a high stakes week and recover quickly is now finding that recovery takes longer. So the highs are lower and the crashes are harder. This is a metabolic and physical resilience issue, not a character flaw. And it has direct revenue consequences because your capacity is the ceiling on what the business can do. And then when relational resilience is underfunded, the isolation affects decision quality, perspective, and the kind of thinking that only happens in genuine relationship and when you feel genuinely supported. It also affects the signal that you're putting out to the world. Women who are deeply connected tend to lead from a different frequency than women who feel alone, disconnected, or undersupported. And in a business where your energy and your presence are part of the offer, that difference shows up on how people experience you. Well, let's reframe this whole thing. There's two ways to relate to your health in this phase. There's the conventional patient mindset and the holistic investor mindset. The conventional patient waits until something's wrong. until the symptom is so loud that she can justify paying attention to it, until the energy crash is so severe it forces a change, until something literally breaks, then she responds. It's how most healthcare systems were designed to work. It's crisis management, not strategic wellness. The holistic investor doesn't wait for a crisis. The holistic investor audits the portfolio regularly. She identifies the underfunded positions, and she makes deliberate allocations before the asset depletes to a point where recovery requires more effort. Not because she's afraid of what's coming, but because she understands the principles of compounding. Small, consistent investments in the right categories create returns that are not available to the person who starts late or waits to recover from dramatic losses. The matriarch phase is the optimal entry point for this portfolio, not because things are going wrong, but because you now have the resources, the self-knowledge, and the physiological awareness to invest strategically. Women in their 30s don't often have that same access to clarity, and women in their late 60s who did not invest are working with a narrower set of options. That does not mean you can't gain by making changes at any point. It simply means it may take longer and cost more. But this phase right now is the window where investments compound most effectively. And again, the return I want you to focus on isn't the generic health or longevity. The ultimate return from strategically auditing your resilience portfolio is choice. The specific, concrete freedom to decide what the next 20 or 30 years of your leadership looks like, to work because you want to or to step back because you want to build the next thing or to hand it off or to do something entirely different on your timeline and yours alone. You chose entrepreneurship because you wanted your own choices. This resilience portfolio is what keeps that ownership intact, not for a fixed window, but for as long as you choose to lead. The highest stakes portfolio you hold is not your business. It's your resilience portfolio that includes your structural, cognitive, spiritual, physical, and relational infrastructure. And you're either compounding the assets in it or they're depleting right now. You do not have to earn the right to invest in it once things slow down, because please, when do things ever slow down? When you wait for the right time to start, what you're really doing is you're borrowing against future assets and depleting your ability to make choices down the road. Start with the category that's the loudest, the one you already know is underfunded. That's where the first investment goes. And if you want to look at all 5 categories together and understand exactly where your resilience portfolio stands right now, that's the work I do in the Richly Resourced audit. It looks at your physiology, your nervous system, your business structure, and your energy as a complete picture, not as separate columns. You can find more detail at evolveminded.com/audit. I'll see you on the next episode.